Morning everyone, welcome to the latest edition of On The Whistle, where we're going to have a chat through Sunderland 3, Middlesbrough 2, but I'm also going to chat a little bit about the conclusion of the transfer window as well, and a little bit of my thoughts on how Sunderland got on and answer some of your questions. Absolutely huge night for Sunderland last night. I think we knew that probably the two toughest games that Sunderland have left this season were Middlesbrough away and Leeds away, and I think we all felt that we would have a good sense of where Sunderland are in terms of the race for the top two, or whether it's probably going to be the playoffs at the end of this month once those two games are out of the way. And I think for Sunderland to get 3 points is an absolutely massive step forward and keeps them very much in the race for the top two. I think not just the result, but also the performance as well. Let's be fair, the first half an hour, Sunderland were really, really poor. I just thought Middlesbrough were more aggressive, they were sharper, their passing was excellent. And I think Sunderland, if we're honest, at sort of 30 minutes were very fortunate to be at 1-1. Dan Neil, obviously a really good, tenacious bit of work to rob Delano Bergzorg of the ball. Really clean strike, but obviously gets a bit of fortune with a deflection that goes in. Middlesbrough at that point should have been more than one goal ahead. So a little bit of fortune there. But I thought the second half, there was so much to like from Sunderland. I thought their aggression, their pressing, also how nicely they moved the ball as well. I thought it was a really good performance. It felt a little bit as if they'd sort of... Middlesbrough will feel that they wasted their dominance in the first half. It felt as if that was going to be the case to Sunderland, that they'd wasted their dominance at the start of the second half. Really sloppy goal to let Hayden Hackney score. Again, a brilliant strike. You have to give him a lot of credit for that. But it actually felt as if the game had started to fizzle out a little bit when Enzo Lefebvre produced that little bit of magic. I think that it was a game where we saw a lot of Sunderland's resilience and also their quality. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. It was interesting speaking to Régis Lebris after the game. Normally, when there's been a few times this season, to be fair, when there's been a marked difference between Sunderland's first half and their second half performance, Lebris tends to sort of diagnose, if you like, a tactical problem that he needs fixing. It was interesting that last night he was pretty clear in his post-match press conference that he felt the difference in the second half was just intensity. He'd said to Sunderland's players that in a game of this intensity, they needed to give a little bit more, basically. They needed to play with a bit more passion, a bit more confidence, and certainly a bit more aggression. I think we definitely saw that in the second half, and that allowed them to then sort of dictate the game on their own terms, really. A couple of performances that I wanted to mention. I thought Dan Neil was a really important part of Sunderland getting back into the game. I thought that his sort of quality and his tenacity at the base of midfield, I think that was an important reason why Sunderland were able to get on the ball a little bit more as the first half progressed, and I thought that was really important in the end result. And of course, we have to talk about Enzo Lefebvre, one of the most magic Sunderland performances I can remember. Every time he got the ball, he just seemed to make the right decision. He made something happen. I spoke about it with James on our post-match reaction video. It's not just the fact that he does kind of wonderful things with the football, it's that he's so efficient. That's the word Lebris always uses. It's not tricks for the sake of it. He's always leading to a chance or opening up some space. I thought he was tremendous. I think that it was an interesting game for me to see Middlesbrough as well, because every time I watch them under Michael Carrick, I'm so impressed with like 80% of their game. I think the way they move the ball is fantastic really at times, and I thought especially in the first half someone couldn't really live with their movement, their rotations, the quality of their passing as well. But I think what we probably saw as well is that the main reason why they're not at the moment an automatic promotion contender is defensively they're just not as strong as the teams around them. We've seen certainly Burnley, also I think Leeds as well to an extent, maybe Sheffield United not quite so much when they've played Sunderland. You felt like even when Sunderland have played well, it's not been easy to get at them. I think you can see with Middlesbrough they have some big issues defending their own box, and I think that's probably why, even though the quality of their play on the ball at times looks very much top two level, I think you can see why maybe they haven't been able to sustain that over the course of the season with their defending. So a huge result for Sunderland really, and I think again definitely flashes of quality certainly from Lefebvre, but I think it was one in which they had to dig in and show some resilience, and I think we probably as well have to shout out Wilson Isidore just for the way he's responded to that night at Burnley. I think we all knew really that his personality and his character that he would bounce back pretty quickly, but he's certainly done that, so a huge amount of praise goes to him. Let's have a look at your questions just in terms of the game. Now I'm going to get to the transfer window in a little bit. And Neil says, was that Lefebvre performance one of the best ever in a Sunderland shirt? God help defences when he's 100% fit. He could be the difference between automatics and playoffs, or am I getting carried away? I think he was that good last night, Neil. I agree with you in that. I think we've all felt it was only a matter of time before the assists started coming. I think every game he's played in, he's created a big chance for a teammate that they just haven't been able to take. So it's no surprise to me that those contributions have started flowing. But was interesting that Lebris spoke when we spoke to him in his press conference before the game, which was last Friday. He was saying that he'd had a conversation with Lefebvre, and Lefebvre kind of admitted that he was enjoying it, but he was struggling a little bit on the left just because it's not his game to be 1v1 with a defender. We all know that's where like Mundle and Watson thrive. And so I'd still think that someone will want to get Lefebvre in field, and I think that's such an exciting prospect because almost every touch last night was a productive one. I honestly don't remember Luke Ayling successfully completing a tackle on him. There may have been one or two over the course of the game, but the amount of times he sort of came out on that top in that duel was remarkable. And listen, I as you can imagine, Neil, I watch a lot of Sunderland games and sometimes they can blur into one. I gave Lefebvre a 10 out of 10 in my player ratings last night. Like you, maybe I was getting a little bit carried away at the time, but I thought it was such a magical performance, a real joy to watch. I was almost giggling at times with some of the things he was doing on the pitch. And so just thinking back, there's not too many 10s I've given in my sort of, I think it's coming up for 9 years in the job now. I know that I gave Pierre Ekwell one in the Southampton game. Disappointing the way Ekwell's Sunderland career sort of went, but if you remember that time we beat Southampton heavily at home, he was amazing. I definitely gave Charlie Wyke and Aidan McGeady 10s when they did the whole 4 assists, 4 goals things against Doncaster in the COVID era. I don't know if you remember that game, because I kind of thought you have to give them 10 out of 10. If you're a winger and you produce 4 assists, if you're a striker and you score 4 goals, that's, you know, it has to be a perfect performance, doesn't it? So it's definitely up there with the ones I've covered in the job. Obviously going back in all the way back to when I first started watching Sunderland, you know, the Quinn and Phillips performances in the Chelsea win at the Stadium of Light. There's definitely a few that I've seen over the years, but I really thought that was such an impactful performance on the face, especially when you consider he was playing out of position in such a big game as well. So just really excited, like you, Neil, to see where he goes from here, and hopefully that little bit of quality can be the difference. I had a question here from Jack this morning. Thanks for sending this in, Jack. He says, thoughts on Sam Ed's sub-appearances look better being brought on to chase down plays and protect the lead against Boro and Derby. Was Plymouth just the wrong game for him, or is he not fit enough to start yet? Really pleased you mentioned this, Jack, actually, because it was something I'd made a note that I wanted to talk about on this video. A lot of you over the course of the season, and me at times as well, have been a bit critical of the substitutions, feeling that they needed to be more proactive, that there needed to be more of them. I thought Lebris got spot on last night. I thought Mienda, when he came on at the end, brought a real injection of energy for Isidore, who'd been brilliant, but I think was clearly tiring. Same with Poveda and Roberts. I know Poveda fell over at the crucial moment when he could have scored, but I thought he brought a bit of energy. I thought the Sam Ed sub was a brave one because at that time it was 2-2, and you could naturally look at it and say, go on, try and win the game. And I think Lebris actually realised that the best way to win the game was to slow things down a bit, to get a little bit of control back. And I thought that Sam Ed was excellent at the base of midfield. I agree with you, Jack. He's had a really, really good impact against both Derby and Middlesbrough. I think you can see what his game is. He breaks up the play. He makes simple but effective decisions on the ball. I thought he showed last night what Sunderland have been missing for quite a long time in terms of natural defensive midfielder. I agree that the Plymouth game just probably wasn't quite right for him. What I would say is that Lebris held his hand up after the Plymouth game to say, okay, it didn't work out, but I feel like the minutes that he's got here from the start and in an intense championship game will benefit us in the future. And Lebris would probably say after last night that was why he did it, was to give him that, help him get up to speed. And I think we saw when he came off the bench, you know, he certainly found it a lot easier than he has in his first few appearances to get up to pace of the game. For me, Jack, I'm pleased you mentioned that, because away from sort of Lefebvre's magic, I thought that was one of the big positives. I thought he had a really good impact. Bodes well moving forward. Chantel also asked about bringing Dan Ballard into the team, as if you mentioned about Sunderland's defending isn't quite there at the moment. Yeah, I do expect Dan Ballard to come into the team at some point. I think he's too good defensively not to. I think it's a real conundrum. I'm really glad that I don't have to make the decision that Lebris does in terms of who he comes in for at some point. So I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit. The one thing I would say is that I think we've seen time and time again this season that Luke O'Nien, of all Sunderland's defensive players, his distribution from the back is the best. Now, I know that it seems a strange time to say that when, admittedly, obviously, you know, he played Job into a bit of a dangerous position, which contributed to Middlesbrough's second goal. But I think you saw for the third goal as well, a brilliant touch from Lefebvre, but a great pass out wide to O'Nien. He is the centre-half who does that best in Sunderland's squad at the moment, so I think that's really difficult for Lebris to leave him out, especially with 2 home games coming up. But we'll see what happens, because I think for sure, I think that, you know, Dan Ballard, especially if Sunderland do keep leaking goals, I think he will have to come back in the team because he defends the box so well. So I want to just chat a little bit before I finish about the transfer window. So by the time that this goes out, I would imagine that people will probably, I think Jayden Danns will have been announced. From what I understand, the deal has gone through. Sunderland just didn't want to announce it last night because obviously with everything that was going on with the match. So that's a done deal. Abdullah Bar has gone on loan to Dunkirk in the French second division. Nathan Bishop obviously went to Cambridge United after his loan to Wycombe was ended early. So a few bits and bobs there. Maybe in terms of done deals, a little bit quieter than we actually thought it might be on deadline day, but certainly important that Sunderland added some cover up front. So Michael says, feel like this team's gone from strength to strength and always managing to bounce back after a setback. I just hope they haven't left it too late to catch the top two. Do we feel like enough quality has been added to give O's a proper go? I think that I have sort of slightly mixed feelings on the transfer window. I think that I agree that it was always going to be a window in which Sunderland needed to add quality, not quantity. I don't think there was a need to add loads and loads of players. I think we saw last night that Lafay could potentially be a bit of a game changer, an absolutely brilliant signing considering we haven't even seen the best of him yet. I think that it's really hard to talk about Jayden Danns because I just haven't seen enough of him, and it's always really unpredictable to know how players are going to go on their first loan because you just don't know how quickly they're going to adapt to Championship football. I think at the start of the window, I think you could see that Sunderland were obviously targeting players with real sort of Championship experience. I think we all know that they were interested in Tom Cannon, they were interested in Ben Brereton Diaz. I think those were players that you could have been really confident were going to hit the ground running immediately and could probably have come pretty much straight into the team. So I think that obviously you could see that when those players went to other clubs, clubs with parachute payments, which are really difficult to compete with. You know, some striker targets went to teams playing in Europe. Chuba Akpom was one example of that. We've seen Sunderland change tack a little bit. I think the one thing I would say is that in that time, sort of coming from November into the end of the transfer window, Wilson Easter and Eliza Mienda have obviously done so well, which has an impact because Sunderland know they can trust them, and we know we can trust them because they've been excellent. So I do feel a little bit as if maybe the window was almost there, but I just think maybe they haven't quite got that. They would have liked another proven player in the final third, and maybe that will prove costly because you look at Burnley signing Marcus Edwards, you look at Sheffield United, as I mentioned, signing Brereton Diaz and Tom Cannon. Maybe that extra bit of quality and experience will prove the difference. We'll have to wait and see. I think that Sunderland, almost their bet is that players like Samed, Paveda, Mundell coming back from injury is going to make a massive difference. And I think we'll obviously have to wait and see. Obviously, encouraging signs from Samed last night. I think we've seen at times that we haven't seen enough from Paveda yet, but hopefully now that he's fit, he can start to have an impact. So I think it's a little bit hard to tell, Michael, at this point whether we have enough quality. I think maybe, you know, it was sort of 75% spot on, I think, but a lot will depend on how much competition Danns can really offer. It's really hard to make a judgment on this point. I don't think a loan for a player with, you know, so inexperience was potentially what Sunderland were really driving at the start of the window, but they feel like he's an excellent prospect, so hopefully he can sort of have a real impact. So I think that will wait and see. I know a few people have reservations about Sunderland's defensive cover. That's definitely something I agree with. With Adji Elise injured, I think Sunderland at the moment they're fine in terms of the options they've got. I think they've got more than enough cover, but they're 1 or 2 injuries away from having a potentially a big issue. So fingers crossed that's something that it's definitely something that in theory could cost them. Let's see how it works out. Hopefully everyone can stay fit and healthy. So yeah, hopefully that answers sort of your questions on the transfer window. I think broadly, especially with Lafay coming in, it's been a positive one. I think maybe I would have liked to have seen a bit more of an experienced player in the final third come in. I think there's a lot of pressure now on Mundell and Watson getting back fit quickly because obviously that left-hand side, although Lafay was amazing last night, it's a position of weakness at the moment in terms of personnel. So let's hope those two can get up to speed. I think they're going to have a really important part to play, and hopefully Watson can quickly, when he's fit, get back into the rhythm after everything that went on with Brighton and all those bids. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the latest edition of On the Whistle, and I'll be back after the Watford game to discuss whatever goes on there. Thanks for watching.